I take one day off because my throat's kind of messed up and the whole world ignites. We got so much news. The Bubba Smollett fake noose hoax. Did you see this one? The NASCAR driver apparently was a pull cord for a garage, but the dude thought it was a noose, went nuts. Ocasio-Cortez won in a landslide, even though she only got 27,000 votes in a district of 705,000, which is kind of insane. And riots have continued to spread. We saw rioting in Madison, Wisconsin, I guess. Rioting taking place in D.C. now multiple nights in a row. Protesters tried to tear down a statue of Andrew Jackson in front of the White House. And let me just tell you, baby, man, it sure does feel like we are inches away from Civil War 2.0. And that's what I want to talk to you all about today. Just some speculative conversation, but I want to show you what's happening in D.C. and explain where I think this may go. Now, as many of you may have seen, and I think I mentioned this, protesters a couple days ago were trying to tear down Andrew Jackson in front of the White House. This, in my opinion, is one of the most bold and brazen attempts so far from the extremists, insurrectionists, as it were, to actually destroy property. I mean, this is in front of the White House. Now, Donald Trump intervened and said that he wants everybody charged with, I think it's the Veterans Memorial Act. And so he's going to enforce this around the country. You can't tear down statues. Some people have said that Trump is playing this smart. And I got to agree, at least a little bit. You see, with the Chaz and the shootings and the chaos, and I've mentioned this before, but the protests have not stopped. Okay, you might not be seeing them in the news because for the most part, people are just marching around, but they're escalating once again. Rioting in D.C., for instance. These are not protesters. You're not a protester when you throw ropes over statues and try to pull them down. That's something else entirely. Call it a rioter, call it a looter. At this point, I think these people are insurrectionists. They'll call themselves revolutionaries. It's all a matter of perspective, and there's the dangerous line. Which the side you're on is determined by whether you think these people are fighting for a good future and resisting tyranny or trying to destroy, an honorable system. That's how it always is with every civil war, with every revolution. Now, a lot of people have said they were trying to bait Trump. They wanted Trump to use the Insurrection Act, march the military in, and that what was going to happen with this, they would be able to say, look, Trump's the dictator. We told you he was. He's shutting down peaceful protest. He did not do it. There are a bunch of viral videos going around now of police enforcing the laws in D.C. Of course, the left is outraged. They didn't get their PR moment they really wanted. Instead, they look like fools because, for the most part, the police took a even-handed approach in dealing with these lunatics trying to pull down statues. Trump did not give in and send out the military. Let's read a little bit of the story, give you some context on what's going on in D.C., and then I want to talk to you about a message someone sent me, which made a really, really good point about a likely probability for civil war and how it will happen. And I got to say, it sounds plausible. That's what's really scary. So I'll just preface it with this. There have been a lot of people who have discussed the possibility of civil war. There have been a lot of people who have said that you're crazy. Some people have said to me that I've gone to the black pill or whatever, and that's ridiculous. What I really don't like about the whole pill conversation is that it ignores reality. Not entirely, but it's subjective viewpoints, and that's ridiculous. People keep saying Tim's the slowest red pill ever. Listen, when we were talking about Gamergate stuff, you realize that this social justice push was happening in very few industries. And over the years, it spread to gaming, to movies, and so on and so forth. It eventually hit journalism. It probably started in journalism, to be honest. But then once started to spread, it started to impact more and more people. My view is not, so you have these people who live in their bubble and read their sources and have confirmation bias. To them, the red pill was obvious and it's been in front of them the whole time. But they don't pay attention to, carpentry or plumbing or other jobs or the NFL. So they say, you should think what I think because of what I see in the world. What I'm seeing and what I'm talking about is specifically a grander view, a step back to look at everything. So they say red pill. It's like, well, listen, there was a time, not even, 6-7 months ago, where none of this was going on and we expected none of this. Okay, I thought I was going to be doing a show. The IRL podcast was going to be more fun pop culture movies, and then it all changed. COVID happened. There's no all of a sudden now you realize, now you've taken the black pill. There's quite literally statues of our founding fathers being torn down. Ulysses S. Grant, Francis Scott Key, a Norwegian anti-slavery activist torn down, insurrectionist riders, what you want to call it, trying to tear down Andrew Jackson in front of the White House. Autonomous zone attempts being set up in multiple places, people being shot and killed, cops being ambushed. So you want to talk about what it means to have taken the pill? No, I'm sorry. I'm paying attention to the news as I've always done. They say Tim is the slowest red pill ever. No, it's because I'm not on your side. That's it. I've never been on anyone's tribe. I'm telling you what, aside from, I guess, America, right? Freedom, the Constitution. So now I'm watching all of these things happen. Okay, there's no all of a sudden I'm now of the perspective, the unique perspective just to me that I've taken, this I've opened my eyes to how dangerous and how bad everything is. No, let me tell you something. It was Bill Maher on his real-time HBO mainstream show saying our rhetoric and jokes could lead to a civil war, and me going, whoa, Bill Maher, what's happening? Is Bill Maher black-pilled? Is my response to him saying we have a lot of high profile? I'm sorry, man. If that's what you think, then you're being naive. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. They are in front of the White House. They tried tearing down the barricades last time. Trump is defending it. And they're being defended. They're being defended by the mainstream left. Okay? So let me show you something. I want to read you a little bit of the story, just a little bit, just to give you some perspective. Chaos ensues as protests continued overnight near D.C.'s autonomous zone. D.C.'s autonomous zone. Donald Trump said there would never be one. Oh, I'm sorry. Perhaps ABC7 didn't get the memo because Twitter censored Donald Trump's tweet saying he would not allow it to be set up. Welcome to the brave new world. You want to talk about black pills or whatever? Twitter is actively censoring the president when he says he will enforce the law. There is a legal way to do things. Not anymore. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, said tearing down the statues was a good thing, right? He praised it. I kid you not. We've got morality policing. And I've been explaining this over and over again. In New York City, the DA said they're not going to prosecute Black Lives Matter activists. Fort Worth released people on rioting charges. But don't you dare, vandalize a Black Lives Matter mural. I heard this. I got to fact check it. But I heard a couple guys got arrested for doing so. You've got in Washington, D.C. and many other states, they paint a political message on public property. Black Lives Matter. Okay. You want to speak? I'm fine. But the government is now favoring one political faction. It is happening in front of you. And dare I say, I watched Ocasio-Cortez win the other day. And I don't know what to take from it. But I think there's a bunch of ways to look at the results. I guess it says to me that the government has begun morality policing. The government is now favoring one political faction. And the people of New York 14 could not care less. Absolutely could not care less. 705,000 people. And the total votes count, I think, is around like 38,000 or 39,000 votes. AOC got 27,000. She wins. She gets to go represent the district to the federal government, for the federal government, and it was just 27,000 votes, a microscopic fraction, a relatively small fraction. But where were any of these people to actually get up and go and vote? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe because this is the primary, maybe the general election. But it says to me, you can look at it a couple ways. The progressives are fervent and on the rise, and no one will stand in their way, in which case Donald Trump will lose in November. Or the culture war is the dominant force. And as much as the media tried claiming everyone hated AOC, they were wrong. And the same is true for Donald Trump. Let me read this for you. And then I want to talk to you about why I have a very pessimistic view. And I want to talk to you about somebody, I mentioned this, somebody sent me an email saying that the Electoral College versus popular vote is going to be the catalyst for what sparks the Civil War. And it was a really, really good point. And it's kind of scary because it's the most plausible explanation for what would start a civil war, in my opinion. But first, just a quick overview. They say protesters and police continued facing off on Tuesday night into the early hours of Wednesday morning in D.C.'s Black House Autonomous Zone near Black Lives Matter Plaza and the White House. I'm sorry, man. You know what? I think you lost. I do. I think it's the fight's already over. Did you see this? There is a Black House Autonomous Zone. It is Black Lives Matter Plaza. End of story. There was no vote. It was a snap decision. It took only a couple of days. And now the media is straight up saying, this is it. This is your world. This is what's happening. And there it is. Did anybody stand up to stop it? Nope. So I think it's already happened. And I don't see how with the cultural institutions now this flipped in terms of the culture war. Maybe this is this is how the Civil War gets averted. Maybe it'll be more like a separatist movement or something where you get a tiny faction of people saying, no, the Constitution must stand. And then most people hate it. They don't care. Did anybody get up in Ocasio-Cortez's district to vote against her? Very few. I think, I'm not sure how many votes Michelle Cruz Cabrera got. I think it was like maybe 7,000 or so. So there are some people who say we want normalcy back. So maybe Trump will win. I don't know. But at a national level, Trump already lost the popular vote in 2016. Some of the analysis that I've seen from the New York Times, for instance, says that Trump will lose the popular vote by a larger margin, but he still may win the Electoral College for obvious reasons. But you've already heard the left say that, was it 18% or 11% of the country's population determines the Senate and the presidency. So they're already viewing this as unfair and broken and cheating. They won the popular vote. They claim Trump cheated. Not about the popular vote, about Russia, Ukraine, now China. Think about everything they've lined up and think about where this leads. So in the context of the protests, I want to show you this tweet. Will Aramis, who is this feller? He's a senior writer for 10 covering platforms, blah, blah, blah. Twitter tweeted, I find it funny. We've placed a public interest notice on this tweet for violating our policy against abusive behavior, specifically the presence of a threat of harm against an identifiable group. Really? What did Trump say? There will never be an autonomous zone in Washington, D.C. as long as I'm your president. If they try, they will be met with serious force. Autonomous zones are illegal. It's not legal to secede from the union in this capacity, I guess. I think you need a 2/3 vote from every state to actually secede from the union. So if a bunch of people want to set up an autonomous zone and you're blocking roads and violating the law, and the president says, I'm going to enforce this law, how is that a threat of force? If someone said, don't murder, otherwise we will defend ourselves, would Twitter take them down? Will Aramis said, this is an especially twisted case because it's so starkly clear that the problem here is not the tweet. It's that the sociopath who's threatening the use of violence on his own people is the effing president of the United States. The use of violence on his own people. Police enforce the law. Murderers are your own people. Should Donald Trump allow murderers to run rampant? No. If you want to remove Andrew Jackson, you vote. And maybe you'd win. I mean, Ocasio-Cortez could win. But I bring this up for a specific reason. This is being spread by a lot of, it's not the most viral tweet, but its mentality is fairly persistent, to say the least. Fairly persistent. People believing that Donald Trump should not have the right to stop 50 people who want to destroy public property. 50 people in a country of 330 million. 50 people want to show up. And the police say, no, you can't do it. And they scream. And the media protects them. Look, I don't know if you guys watched Tucker last night, but you look at the Bubba Smollett hoax, okay? The fake noose. I love it. It's hilarious. This guy claimed that a garage pull rope was a noose. And what happened? Everyone marched behind him. Reality is gone. They're changing the names of streets. The media is uncritically reporting it. They're tearing down statues, and they're not supporting law enforcement. Now, let me give you what they would call the most pessimistic view. Earlier this year, a bunch of governors enacted unconstitutional edict. And what happened? The police, with a smile on their face, enforced it. Then, when the rioters came out, the police, with a shrug on their shoulders, said, well, we're not going to stop this or deal with this. You're being mean to us. I don't mean every cop in the country, but I mean enough of these blue city, blue state police officers were absolutely willing to allow the looting and destruction. They were absolutely willing to show up. There was one woman who was selling items on Facebook Live at night, and the cops shut her down. They will arrest you for going to a gym, and the police have no problem doing it. Surprise, surprise, the Constitution is gone. So I don't know. Look, You might say I'm being pessimistic, but I'm sorry, man. When we see statues being torn down across the country, and what did we get? One politician speaking out against it. No, I'm sorry. There was a Democrat. I forgot his name. So I apologize for this because he doesn't deserve respect. A Democratic politician said we can't do this. Tom Cotton said we can't do this. Trump said he'll enforce against this. Where's everybody else? Where are the police? They don't care. Nobody does. And this is the big problem. So there was a rant from me from the Timcast IRL podcast that people are sharing around where I said no one's going to stand up for themselves. And that's true. It's absolutely true. It's just not going to happen. I don't know what you expect people to do. I mean, one guy in New Mexico showed up with a gun to stop the statue thing. They beat him. Apparently had knives. They may or may not have knives. And he shot a guy. Charges have been dropped so far. But I'm sorry, man. The leftist outrage mobs, the insurrectionists, are expanding. They're taking ground. They're destroying things, and nothing is stopping them. It's a wacky 2020, I'll tell you what. I have no reason to believe that people are going to choose Joe Biden over this, but we're beyond divided. Now let's talk about the prospect of a civil war. And let's talk about what the most plausible, or at least a plausible outcome that kind of scared me when someone brought it up. First, as I've pointed out before, to all the people who are saying things like, you know, after my rant about standing up for yourself and quitting your job, I get the same criticism. I have a family, Tim. You don't understand how lucky you are. You can take that risk. Shut up. I'm tired of hearing it. I just don't care anymore. Okay, fine. You got a family. I get it. I don't. I get it. I really do. Let me ask you about what world you want to leave for your children, where they're bending the knee based on their race, where all of their history has been purged and destroyed. Nah, sorry. You'd rather have that future. You're not providing a future for your kids by falling in line and bending the knee to these dogmatic fanatics. You're ensuring the destruction of your children and their world. So please spare me when you're like, but what about my family? Yeah, what about your family now, dude? If you won't speak up, I'm not asking for much. I'm asking you just voice your opinion. Are you really that scared you'll get fired for voicing your opinion? Then it's worse than you realize. That's it. I'm saying, why don't you go out with a sign and say no? Why don't you tell your boss, hey man, this makes me uncomfortable. I don't want you to do it. Okay, fine. Then you don't deserve to have, if you're going to give up your freedom or refuse to stand for it. And I look back to the founding fathers, give me liberty or give me death. Live free or die, they say in New Hampshire. Yeah, a lot of people sure don't believe that anymore. How many of the founding fathers had children and said, I am going to stand up and defend my new nation against the British Empire? They had kids. You ever see the movie The Patriot? I know it's not real, but come on. People, if you're not willing to stand up and fight for your future, then you don't. Then your children don't deserve it. That's it. So listen, Brett Weinstein mentioned the possibility of some civil war. I don't want to overstate his predictions, but he said, something to this effect. We had Peter Turchin, who predicted in 2010 that there was a potential for civil unrest and it was coming in 2020. And then he said again in an interview that civil war is possible. And I cite these all the time, so forgive me if you haven't heard it, but people need to hear this. There was an article, I believe it was either like the New York Magazine or the Atlantic. I think it was New York Magazine, where they interviewed a bunch of national security experts who said something to the effect of, we predict a very high probability of civil war in the United States in the next, 6 or 10 years. This was 3 or 4 years ago. I have been talking with people about what I expected to happen. And guess what? I hate to say it. I'll preface this by saying I don't make extremely hard predictions, but I predicted the gist of what's happening. And it's easy to say, look, I'm not saying like I can read the future from my crystal ball. I said, man, if this violence keeps getting worse, what do you think's going to happen? You're going to see this, that, and this. And then those things happened. Brett Weinstein predicted this on the Joe Rogan podcast. They mentioned it. And he's like, yep. And here's what I think may occur next, unless there's some kind of leadership. So I think that we're closer than we've ever been. Is it so easy to say that it will happen? Not so much. So if I've pressed too hard on it in the past, let me just say I lean towards the likelihood of a second civil war happening. I used to have conversations a few years ago in this group chat with some conservatives who were adamant that the security apparatus of the United States would never allow a civil war. You're nuts. They've been fighting each other nonstop. Donald Trump, Ukraine gate. Now they're trying to say he's colluding with China. Bill Barr firing the Southern District of New York, U.S. attorney. You think they're unified? They're not. Let me tell you something else. We now know for a fact that police in blue states and cities will salivate at the opportunity to break the Constitution, to tear it to shreds, and they'll laugh while they do it. These are some of the worst. These are people who they were supposed to swear an oath to the Constitution. Then as soon as the government said, do it, they went, okay. And that was it. That's all they needed. All they needed was someone else to say, you do it. Yep, just following orders, just doing my job, right? You have a constitution you swore to uphold, but they don't. So what do I think will happen? I think if it came down to it, the police would laugh all the way. If you told these cops to go and light the Constitution on fire, I'm being extremely hyperbolic, mind you, they would laugh as they did it, okay? Obviously, not literally. I'm saying they're walking around saying, I don't care about this. It's just, look, the avalanche has happened. And these cops are the snowflakes saying, but it's not my fault. I'm just one cop. Shut up. I don't care anymore. So I'm sorry I buried it for this long because there's so much to say, but someone messaged this to me. They said, what would happen if Donald Trump wins the Electoral College and loses the popular vote? But then one of these blue states decides that their electoral votes should go to the popular vote winner, not based on the Electoral College of their state. And they argue they have a right to do it. The Supreme Court, my understanding is, hasn't yet ruled on faithless electors, but this wouldn't even be a faithless elector. This would be the state straight up saying, even though this state voted for Donald Trump, Michigan, for example, Governor Whitmer, 16 electoral votes. They have said over and over again that, Moody's Analytics said Donald Trump will win unless they have maximum voter turnout. All of a sudden they do mail-in voting, making it a lot easier to vote for a lot of people, to increase voter turnout. That's been my prediction. It hasn't necessarily come true, especially in CA 25. But then, so here's a possibility. One of these states just simply says, Joe Biden won the popular vote by too large a margin, and it would be unfair to give our electoral votes to the winner of the Electoral College. We're going to give to the popular vote winner instead. And that is, interestingly, them saying, we are honoring the Electoral College. So put it this way. Donald Trump needs but a few, he wins by but a few electoral votes. Then Governor Whitmer comes out and says, well, Michigan should be red, but our Electoral College votes should go to the Democratic, to Joe Biden because he won the popular vote, thus giving Joe Biden the swing. Donald Trump then says, you can't do that. The Republicans say you can't do that. And the Democrats say, yes, we can. The states choose who they vote for. And then Trump says, we won the Electoral College. The Democrats say, we won the Electoral College. Both sides declare victory. And then what happens? No idea. Counting heads. Who will be loyal to who? Well, the generals already came out and went after Trump. So it's very likely that Trump would just be removed, in my opinion. So this is a very, very far-fetched, in my opinion. But the general idea that one of these Democratic governors would give their swing state to the opposing side, maybe even Trump, I think is possible. Absolutely. The most likely, in my opinion, would be them giving it to Joe Biden, saying he won the popular vote and we're not playing this game. We can choose where our electoral votes go to. Then it'll go to the Supreme Court. Who knows how long that'll take. Far left violence erupts in many cities. It gets nuts in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump then brings in the army. They then say, you can't do this. Due to the threat of instability, you'll start to see high-ranking officials in the army turn on Trump and say, stability is more important, the union must prevail, and Trump must be removed. And welcome to Civil War 2.0, baby. Maybe not. Maybe that won't happen. Maybe after the election, Trump wins and everything goes back to normal. Maybe after the election, Joe Biden wins and everything goes back to normal. I just really doubt it. Because they're tearing down statues, they're banning movies, they're renaming streets in cities across the country. And we've heard it now from Cubans. We hear it now from Venezuelans. This is exactly what happened when they had their revolutions. They started banning movies, and it's happening right now. It's not a joke. We're in the culture revolution. It's funny. I've said this over and over again in the past several years. There is no point. There is no point where you are in it. We look back at history and we condense everything. It's hilarious how people can't see this. The fact that people don't understand the difference between Christopher Columbus and Thomas Jefferson. You want to know what the difference is between these two men? I don't know, 250 years. Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence in, I believe it was like it wasn't 1776. It may have been. But, the reason I bring that up is people argue the dates. Like July 2nd, 1776 was the Declaration. The war went on for a few years. But the point is, it was hundreds of years apart when the first European colonists started heading for the Americas. Hundreds of years. But people condense their history. Colonialism to them is all just one flash in the pan. No, it was hundreds of years. And it wasn't just the Americas, it was Africa, it was all over the world. So we look back at history and we know exactly when the shot heard round the world was. That's what they call it, right? The revolution and other civil wars and other conflicts. We look back and we say, that's when it happened. That's when it started. We're in it right now. We can't see the forest. We're in it, okay? They are tearing down statues and people stand by and do nothing. They are banning movies and people say, oh, well, it doesn't matter to me, I guess. And that's it. I'm sorry to all the people who love the Constitution, but you can argue that you're the silent majority and all that stuff. I don't believe it. I absolutely do not believe it. Because Ocasio-Cortez won. And any one of these people could have come up and vote. And a tiny fraction did. What is it? 1%. 1% of this district decided to vote against AOC. So no, the left is taking over because they're active, they're fervent, they're standing up, and they've taken the cultural institutions. Now, moderates and conservatives are too scared to speak up out of fear of losing their jobs because they have kids, and that's an advantage the left has. They don't have kids. They don't have kids, so they don't care. They'll do whatever they want, and no one will stop them. So what makes you think you're going to win? I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of this is speculative. It's very speculative. And for all I know, that 6 months goes by and everything goes back to normal and we're sitting here eating, sipping on pina colada and like, wow, man, I can't believe how crazy I was. But let me tell you something. 3 years ago, I said, wow, all of this looks like it's going to get worse. The violence will escalate. Here we are, tearing down statues, riots in D.C. They're trying, they vandalized St. John's Church twice now. They're saying Trump shouldn't be allowed to enforce the law. And the media is defending them. They're changing the names of streets without vote. And the media just uncritically goes along with it. So it's here, whether you want to admit it or not. Now, maybe because history is written by the victors, when the left finally does take over and changes everything and rewrites everything, and Tucker Carlson is completely purged, and NASCAR is purged, and anything that conservatives ever liked is purged, you won't exist and your history won't exist either. And there you go. So maybe it will be a flash in the pan. Maybe it will be a whole lot of nothing. Maybe in 3 years, we'll all be wearing gray jumpsuits and we'll walk up to each other and singing the praises of glorious new leader, saying, wow, didn't something happen a few years ago? What was that thing we used to have? Civil rights? Rights? Uh-oh, wrong think. Then you're gone. California Democrats have voted to repeal their civil rights provision from their constitution. And they did it in a very clever way by calling it affirmative action amendment. But they didn't amend anything. They just literally struck through to remove the clause in their constitution that says the state shall not discriminate based on race, color, ethnicity. So welcome to the future, man. What else can you expect? Whatever, I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.